Hey everybody, Tom Henderson from RESGEN here, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. This is going to be a fun episode today because my guest is Paul Harris. Paul is a stand-up comedian. He's the lead singer of a band that he started called the Cleverlys, and he's a husband and a father. On the podcast today, we talk about a lot of great stuff, including just being present at home, not having your identity wrapped up in who you are and in what you do, and just what humor does in our life, and how he even came to be a comedian, which is a great story of how other people invested in him to be able to get him to where he's at today. I'm really glad you're joining me today. Here's my conversation with Paul Harris. Paul Harris, dude, thanks for coming and being a part of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, this is fun. And what makes it kind of so fun is that we're obviously still newly getting to know one another. Mm-hmm. We just did our first event together last night. And so I know that for listeners, you're not going to be totally aware, but we did an event called the Date Night Comedy in the first weekend of February. And Paul was a part of that. And it was super awesome. And so, and you graciously opened yourself up to coming and sitting at the podcast table with me. So I'm thankful for that.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well,
you might regret it.
Yeah.
But thanks.
I doubt it. Oh, and hearing some laughter in the background, I probably should make mention that our good friend Ted Cunningham is in the studio right now. So if listeners or people that are viewing right now, if you hear some extra laughter coming from the wings, it's because we got a live studio audience, which will be kind of fun this morning or whatever you're listening. So first of all, Paul, just give us a little intro to who you are, okay? Because this is going to be an introduction to many people. It's like who you are, family, what you do for a living, and all that.
Well, I'm a husband and a father of a 7-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm. Older father, which is a dynamic that I embrace because it's, I think I'm a much better dad at this stage in my life than I would have been in an earlier stage of my life. But yeah, that's who I am. I'm a dad and a father, and my sideline is I'm a comedian and a musician.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna come back to the parenting a little later in life than maybe, because I got started being a dad when I was 25 years old. And I look back on that and say, well, I could have used a lot more wisdom going into that thing, a little bit more maturity, if you will. So we're going to come back to that because I know that, even that journey to becoming a father was something that's a big part of your story, and
absolutely.
Seeing God's faithfulness in your life and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to come back to that. But before we get into, some of those kinds of topics, I want to first have you just share a little bit about how you chose comedy, because I think there's a lot of people that say, oh, that would be a lot of fun to be a comedian. But there's also a part of being a comedian that you have to know you're funny, right? I mean, and there's some pressure. There's some pressure with standing on a stage and saying, you're coming because I'm going to make you laugh. So how did you even get into the whole comedy world?
It started from the time I was really little. My mom talks about me standing on a milk crate in front of the room, and I would preach. Even before I could talk, I was there preaching, and I had all the inflections, and I was drawing the crowd, and then it grew into to me designing, writing little routines in my room.
How old were you at this time? So you're writing routines at what age?
7, 8, 9, 10.
That's amazing.
As I got older, even into my early teens, I still did it. I would recruit family members to be in sketch comedy, and my mom would be in the kitchen with her, with the neighbors, and they would all be in there having coffee and smoking cigarettes. And I'd be in my room, and I'd have my keyboard or my guitar, and I'd write a song, and I'd go out and I'd sing it, or do some sort of sketch that I saw on Saturday Night Live, and go out there and do that. And our neighbor, and we lived in Chicago at this time. My family moved from Arkansas when I was in the third grade, and we moved to Chicago. And for my stepdad to find work.
Okay.
And so we had a really close, tight knit neighborhood. In Chicago, everybody sat on everybody's stoop in the afternoon, and it was over at this stoop one day and this stoop, and all the kids, we were like cousins and family members. And so one of the neighbors saw that I had this talent, and so she enrolled me into acting classes.
Wow.
And so I, at 12 years old, and so I went to this class, and it just, it was like that's what I was meant to do. And so from early on, I was really more into improv than I was, and comedy than I was any kind of serious roles.
Yeah.
And even in the drama programs and stuff that I was involved with, they would give us serious topics, and I would always write a comedic
Angle or whatever.
Angle to that sketch. And so a lot of times they didn't ask me to be in something if, they're like, oh, well, this probably isn't for you. Even serious situations, I always tried to make people laugh. I could, when somebody was down, I was trying, to make them laugh, to bring the seriousness down. And that got in the way a lot of the times. They're like, hey, look, you got to put this aside. This isn't the time or place for that. But I couldn't distinguish that. That was just my angle, like you say. I always thought of it from a comedy aspect. So when I was in my family moved from Chicago back to Arkansas into the Ozarks when I was 15 years old.
Okay.
And so it was like daylight and dark. I went from a class of 1,100 kids in Chicago to a class of 11 and graduated with 6 at that little school.
Wow.
And they didn't have any kind of an arts program or anything there. But I became their arts program, basically. They asked me to do all of the assemblies instead of the principal speaking or the teachers speaking. They go, oh, hey, Paul, do it. And so I could come up there like I dressed like Ronald Reagan. And I go, well, welcome to the faculty meeting today. And, as this kid, and so, there was no outlet in the neighboring town was kind of the county seat, Mountain View, Arkansas. At that time, I think the population 2,500. And it was a tourist town, though. It's known to be like the folk music capital of the world. It's really steeped in grassroots music. And they had a small theater there, a little mom and pop theater called the White River Hoedown, and that was the only stage in the county. And they had a talent contest, and I was like 16 years old, and they had a talent contest, and you could win. At the end of this series, at the end of the summer, the finale, you could win $500. I thought, man, I'm gonna do this. So I entered up in the contest, and I came out and I did my Ronald Reagan thing and the whatever jokes I had at the time. It wasn't very much. I was more into like physical falls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'd come out and I'd fall and roll into the
Physical
crowd.
humor.
I did that a lot of that.
Yeah.
I love John Ritter. He was one of my favorite physical comics. But so the owner of the Hoedown, after the thing, he come down there and he goes, and I won that particular night to move me on to the next level. And he said, I want you to I don't think you should be in this contest. And I was all sad. He said, I think you should come and work for me at this show. And I said, okay. So it was $20 a night. They did primarily weekends. And they had what we call cliche comedy, where it's like this hillbilly character, and they black their teeth out and the big bow tie, and you wear the overalls, and you just, you play country stupid, basically, is what I call it. And there was 2 older comics there, comedians, and the older gentleman who became a dear friend of mine and a mentor to me, said, I went out and I did my Ronald Reagan thing that night, and it bombed. No laugh. And I was backstage just feeling low.
Yeah.
And so he's like, we got to get you dressed up. Let's dress you up. And he dressed me up in this character. And he goes, we're going to call you Chester P. Drawers. That's going to be your name, Chester P. And he said, I'm gonna go out and do this routine, and you're just going to just kind of stand there. And so I took over the show. I was standing there, but then I started doing, all this physical stuff behind him. And he thought he was really doing well. He thought he was killing it, but they were laughing at me behind him. And then from then on, I upstaged him every chance I got. I didn't have jokes or routine. I was just like this physical comic.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what fueled it. From there, this is a long story. I don't know if you're wanting to continue going here.
I want to keep going on that. But there's a couple of things that you said that I don't want people to miss, and that really resonated with me as you're sharing, Paul. Is starting back when obviously you had this gift from God. You had this natural bent towards humor, entertainment, the whole milk crate coming in. So what I heard throughout your story is just support of people allowing you to come and stand on the milk crate and do your thing, and enjoying that, and the amount of confidence and investment in you that really built you up. And then the story, what I love the most out of everything that you just shared was when you were in third grade and you have a neighbor lady in Chicago see this potential in a kid and say, I want to send you to acting school. That's amazing.
It is amazing.
That's amazing.
What's amazing about that is I had the chance to reunite with that neighborhood about 10 years ago. My wife took me up there on my 40th birthday, and she got in touch with all those neighbors, and we had this pizza party in our old neighborhood, and she was there. And I told her, that was kind of the stepping stone for me, the launching pad for me. Mm-hmm. And she didn't even remember doing that. She goes, I barely even remembered that. Huh. I go, well, that meant so much to me. You need to know that.
And you saying that to her meant so much to her.
Yeah.
I even see it just, most people are listeners and stuff. And even I can feel the emotion and just like how much that meant to you. And I think about, people ask all the time as to, why I am like who I am.
Yeah.
I'm 47 years old, married for 26 years, couple boys, but came from a background that was a challenge in a lot of ways, but what I always tell them is, I had specifically 3 men that invested in me. And all 3 of those now have been, well, really 4, but 3 of the 4 have been on this podcast. And, they really helped me, shape me into who I am today. And God continues to bring people into my life that continues to shape me. And I think about the power of you going and thanking her, how that gave her life. The whole idea of this podcast, the Giving Life podcast is, how do we as men, our life in Christ, how do we give life to others? And I just think about how meaningful that must have been for her to be reminded, because which is crazy. She didn't even remember doing that. She hasn't been watching you and going, I did that.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But yet you went and said, thank you. And I can't imagine that night she went home and was like, wow, that meant a ton. Mm-hmm. That's so cool. Man.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's so great. And then for the school, and being someone who did school assemblies for multiple years, that was a big part of RESGEN for many years. I was traveling around. I've been to 28 states and did school assemblies, middle schools, high schools, talked about bullying and caring for each other and loving each other in the hallway and all that kind of stuff, shared my story and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's a big deal to get up in front of teenagers as an adult, even, to be like, because they're like, oh geez, you're just an old dude, right? But the pressure to even just be a peer and get up in front of your peers and like be the school assembly, that's a great story. I love that.
I think I'm more fearful now about the stage than I was then. Like then it was excitement. And now it's almost like I got to live up to something.
Yeah. Oof.
It's like, I got to be good.
Oh.
This has got to be good.
Oh, man.
Then it's like, let's see if I can get something good here.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, back in those days, I was absolutely fearless when it come to jumping on stage.
Oh, Paul, wow. Yeah, keep going.
I was at a concert one time, a guy named, by the name of Tony Joe White. He was a really well-known writer and singer. He had Polk Salad Annie. I don't know if you remember that song. Rainy Night in Georgia. Those were his songs. Elvis eventually recorded Polk Salad Annie, but that was a Tony Joe White song. And he was doing a fundraiser for our high school in Arkansas at that theater. And this was actually around the same time I got hired by the Hoedown. And he was late. And so our high school principal was on stage, and he was trying to keep the crowd calm and just tell him he's going to be there, and he's just trying to waste time. And he looks down, he sees me on like the third row. He goes, Paul, you get up here and do something. And now, if somebody would do that to me, put me on the spot like that, now I would probably melt into my seat and probably be furious with him for trying to put me on.
Yeah.
Then I dove over the seats. I jumped up in front of all these people. Yeah, I didn't know any of them people. Yeah. They were there to see Tony Joe White. And I did like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. I don't know how long I was up there. And it was probably really bad, but I got some laughs.
Yeah.
And so that was a victory for me.
Yeah.
It was. I'll never forget that moment.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think a lot of times we can, you can look back and now and say like that those are such formative things, but even to just in that moment say that this is something that is, did I kill it? Did I do this? I mean, who knows? But you seize the opportunity and didn't allow, the overthinking it even afterwards to get in the way of you moving on. Because, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we often do. I know I do this often. It's like, oh, I wish I would have said this, or I wish I would have done this better, or whatever, as opposed to just celebrating the opportunity and celebrating the wins of that time. I have a good buddy that owns a pizza joint in Oregon City, Oregon, Jimmy O's. I've given him a shout out on the pod before, so I'm gonna give him one more. It's literally the best pizza you've ever had. It's like a casserole on dough. It's amazing. But he always talked to me about the principle of saying like, look, I can serve 100 pizzas and 99 people say, man, that was the best pizza I've ever had. And I would be one of those 99. But then you have one comment that says, that was horrendous. It was underdone. It was, whatever. And what do you go home thinking about that night? The one pizza, right?
That's so true. Social media does that to me. We had a viral video on TikTok. Our band did just like a month ago. And so I'm reading all the comments, and it's all these wonderful comments. I love these guys. This band is great. And then this one guy comes on and goes, you guys are hacks. Cheese balls. You're ruining bluegrass music. And for 2 days I stewed over what I should say back to this guy. And then I just, it was like a light came on. I was like, you know what? Think about all of those great comments. Why is that one comment burning you so bad?
It's true.
It did. It burnt me for 2 days. I thought about that guy.
Yeah. And
let's look at his profile.
Yeah, exactly.
Where does he live?
Well, and for those 2 days, that impacts how we react and
Absolutely.
how we treat other people. That impacts our marriage. It impacts our, parenting, the way that we go into like the office or whatever. Those kinds of things impact us. So it's really about, and we can say we got thick skin, letting things roll off our back, but that takes intention to do that. So,
it does. Yeah, you're not born with thick skin. I think experiences give you thick skin. I don't even know if thick skin is the right way to is the proper terminology for that.
It's perspective, though.
It's perspective, yeah.
Yeah, it's perspective, and just saying and recognizing it. I remember, like, it's a significantly different thing, but I remember when Gary Anderson missed his first field goal of the year against the Atlanta Falcons that caused the Vikings to not go to the Super Bowl that year in 1999. I'm a huge Vikings fan. It's
Sorry.
Yeah, it's a tough life. But I remember again being so upset that he missed the field goal and that they lost that game 38-35. I think it was a score. And for 2 days, I didn't eat. Like, I was so upset and all this, and the way that impacted my mood and my life. And after 2 days, I was thinking, all the players, they're eating. They've moved on. I mean, they're bummed, but they've moved on. Why am I allowing, this external thing to impact me to a level that it's causing me to live differently, react differently, be in relationship differently? It's that whole idea of man, there's so many positives we can be thinking about, but yet our brain sometimes just naturally in the world we live in just gravitates towards the negative. And I just, that's something I just continually am thinking about. So I'm grateful that even your statement of getting, I don't want to call it performance anxiety, but that this whole idea of like, man, there's these expectations that I got to meet. And how it's impossible to meet everybody's expectations. And I think as men, that's one of the things that we struggle with is, just mentally, how do we deal with that?
Absolutely. And think about how the kicker felt.
Right.
Think about Maher, the Dallas Cowboy kicker.
Yeah.
And I see, Ted and I have a lot of friends that are Dallas Cowboy fans. And by the way, I don't know if you've called them out at church for their actions about how they reacted to that kicker. You should call them out.
From the pulpit.
From the pulpit.
I actually know his dad because his dad was the superintendent of schools here in Sioux Falls for years.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I remember when he got that gig, and he was kicking lights out. I mean, for many, many years, and then this year just it just didn't work out in several games, right?
You know what? He was being a human. And think about that for a minute of the expectations that are on him, and he's done so well all this time, lights out kicker, and then he has this bad moment at the worst time possible. Think about that when you're laying down at night.
Yeah. Well, we've got, and it is, it's we can become a slave to success. And sometimes we just think it's going to be just success every time. And then, like you said, when it doesn't necessarily turn out the way that we wanted it to, or that we envisioned it in our brain, it's all, okay, so now how do we react to that? And what does it look like for us to say, all right, you know what? It is called being a human. And coming from someone who struggles with perfectionism and tries to I'm very type A and organized and all that kind of thing. That's something I'm continually working on. Is just saying like, look, there's no possible way to meet expectations every single time. And not every joke is going to land with every person. Not every message is going to be a home run. And I remember going away. And it was in 2019, and it was in 2019, right after the men's summit, and I knew that there was a shift coming in RESGEN. The Lord was shifting us to moving us from being more student focused to men, marriage, parenting, that kind of thing. And I went away for like an elongated kind of 4-day deal with the Lord went into northern Minnesota, purposefully drove 5 hours so that I couldn't quickly get home when things got hard or when I felt like I was lonely or whatever. For an extrovert, I knew that would happen probably within 30 minutes. So I'm like, I got to get far away so I can't come home right away. But it was interesting because I first went up with my plan of how I'm going to nail down everything that I need to do to get RESGEN to the next level or to where I thought God was taking it or whatever. But it was interesting, Paul, was that when I got up there, the Lord wouldn't let me kind of dive into any of that stuff because he said, I first want to work on you. And through that process of just saying, okay, so why am I thinking the way I am? But what I realized is that I had this expectation of myself and this pressure that I was putting on myself that every time I get on a stage, I have to hit a home run or I have to do this. And when we have that kind of mentality, number one, it becomes about us. But number two, it's crippling because again, we become a slave to the expectations. And that hinders even the freedom of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, I appreciate so much. So let me ask you this. So how do you, so you're yes, a comedian, but right now you are living in, you're the lead singer of the band called the Cleverlys.
Mm-hmm.
People come to hear you do your thing, all of that. And there is a pressure with that comes with that. So how do you personally just process and deal with that pressure? Because, we obviously have guys that are in all different kinds of fields of work, like preparing for a meeting, leading this company, doing whatever that they do for their career. And we all have different pressures. So how do you deal with the pressure of meeting people's expectations or doing what you do on a regular basis?
But I was listening to you talk about it, and it sounded like, with RESGEN, you had to reinvent that. I've had to reinvent my career many times over, and I've had many careers within the entertainment thing. It was Branson. Trying to exit Branson and go into a mainstream thing. I completely had to reinvent what I was doing. And I was completely focused on that for a long time. My wife and I, we've been married for 18 years. And when we first got together, we were both really driven and career oriented, and we put a lot of our efforts into trying to build those careers. And it was a fine old machine, we thought, until our daughter came along, and then we had to reinvent that whole, our family system.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is because, I deal with that pressure by whenever I get home, honestly, and I probably would be a lot farther along in my career than I am if I didn't shut that. I don't allow that into my time at home, because I'm gone. I'm on the road all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm focused when I'm on the road. And I FaceTime them. We Zoom and FaceTime each other, and we have planned times that we do that every day. But for the most part, I'm completely focused on this. And I travel. I do 80-something shows a year or more. I've got the band. We don't do fly dates because it's hard to travel with band and gear and merch and all that. So we don't do a lot of fly dates. So a lot of the time we're in the van or in the bus, and I'm focused on that. When I get home, I'm focused on them, and I make a point to do that. I don't hardly take calls when they're at home. I do that when they're not around. So when they're there, I get to release. Like, I get to leave all of that outside, and I do.
That's
unless
good.
It's really, really important that I have to take it, a meeting or a call or do something outside of the norm. I will do that. But for the most part, I have rules. I don't even have, if you go into my house, I don't have a room where I have memorabilia of my career. I don't have boxes with that stuff in there. It's like that is completely, it's not important to me. And I do that intentionally, because our home is that's our main focus, is our family whenever I'm at home. So that's kind of how I deal with that. It may not be the right way. I would probably be a lot farther along in my career if I was more driven and focused on that 24/7. But I start having a lot of issues when I start focusing on just that. When I make that a priority over God and my family, then I really start having issues internally and within our family. So it's especially since our daughter came along, I've intentionally made that a point, and I've structured my life that way, and I feel a lot better that way. I'm happier. Had a friend one time talk to me about contentment. I'm more content now than I've ever been, because I'm less focused on that. and more focused on them, and more focused on God and our relationship at home. And our family is thriving because of that.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And I just, and I remember our first conversation. That was Ted. Ted was trying to call me right there. That was Ted. Come on, Ted. But at any rate, so here's the deal. I don't even know, like, that's weird. It's even on silent. I can't, you must have the bat phone. It just gets right through to me. All right. So
I don't know. Maybe you need to take that call. I'm just saying.
Yeah, the Lord might be calling. But I remember the first time you and I spoke on the phone. You know, Ted had connected us via text, and you know, so that when I called, we talked for a minute, and then you said, "Hey, I need to jump off the phone real quick because I need to go pick up my daughter from school. But as soon as I do that, and then I get home, and then I'll call you back." And what I loved about that was, number one, it showed that that you really live out what you just said, and that's been something that I think is, and maybe that is just the maturity of like recognizing, okay, you know what, I need to really put my focus on my wife, my kids, whatever, because I that was one of the biggest mistakes I made when my kids were young, was that I would often bring my work home a lot with me. I'd walk in the door, I'd be on my phone, you know, I'd be like, so then they're trying to run up to me, or they're trying, you know, Laura's trying to kiss me with, you know, that was a day or whatever. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm taking this call. I'll be done in a second. And I remember making just almost like a habit, a standard of saying, when I walk through the door, I'm not going to do that anymore. And so if I'm on the phone while I'm driving home, which unfortunately sometimes I have to be, I'll pull into my garage and I'll finish that phone call first, and then just breathe and just got to exhale out the day, and I'm getting better. And that was probably 3, 4, 5 years ago that I started doing that. And then now walking into the door and saying, okay, this is my focus. But again, it takes intention. It takes, you know, a concerted effort to do that. And so I just remember when you said that, I was like, man, I love that. I love that you have that standard, and you wanted your focus to be on your 7-year-old when you pick her up from school, as opposed to, hey, Dad's on the phone and I'll be with you in a second. That speaks volumes. And that's something that she'll remember for a very long time, even when she, you know, as a teen, and, you know, eventually when she maybe meets some dude and you got to give her away at a wedding, you know, those types of things. Those are memories she'll carry forever.
You know, I again, intentionally, I do that because at the end of it all, I don't want her to, when they ask about her dad, well, he was a hard worker. He was a businessman, good businessman. Mm-hmm. That's all fine, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. You know, there's, you know, I believe in hard work, and I believe in being a good steward of your business. But I want the first things that come out of her mouth to say, you know what, he spent time with me. He was present around me. Mm-hmm. You know, he was funny with me. He laughed with me. We were tight. We were close. He was gone a lot because I have to be gone a lot.
Yeah.
It's what I do.
Yeah.
He was gone a lot, but when he was at home, he was present.
Yes.
You know, and that's what I want her to say.
That's so good. That is so good.
And I hope she does. And
she will.
Already she gets it.
Yeah.
You know, I apologized when I had to leave to come here. And she goes, Dad, I understand. And for her to be 7 years old and to understand, and she said, I understand, I'm just going to miss you. And I said, I'm going to miss you too. But when I get back, you know, I'm hers. Yeah. And she knows that.
Yeah.
You know? And so at the end of the day, I don't strive to be the best comedian or the best entertainer or whatever. It's just what I do for a living, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That's not who I am. Who I want to be is Chelsea's husband and Hanley's father. Mm-hmm. To me, that honestly, that's where I'm at. Well,
I love it, and you even said that. So when I said introduce yourself to the audience, you know, you didn't say, well, I'm the lead singer of a band called the Cleverlys that I created. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I'm also a husband and a father. You know, you led with the husband and father. And I remember, again, I mean, this is something that I've just learned, and I don't do this every time, but a lot of times when people say, so Tom, who are you? Or like, and who are you? I said, well, number one, I'm a child that's been adopted in the family of God. Number two, I'm a husband to Laura. Number three, I'm a father to Isaiah and Chase. And then I have this ministry called RESGEN that I get to do, and it's just those, and it's not so much about, it's more of a reminder to me. It's a reminder to me.
I like that.
Of what's important. And that, because you think about even like the prayers in the Old Testament, it's like, when you hear some of these prayers in the Old Testament, it's like, you are the God that did this. You are the God that did this. You are the God that did this. You are the God that saved us from. It's all this history that these people are going through in their prayers. And it's not because God doesn't know that. I feel like that they do that because they're reminding themselves of the God that is with them, of the God that they serve. And so for me, that's been something that's huge in my life, is just saying, let's not lead with what we do. And as men, that's what we do. Come on. That's most often what we do, because we sit there and we say that our identity so often is drawn from what we do. What is our level of expertise, or that we've risen to, or whatever. But what you said there, I'm just telling you, that is gold. It is absolute gold. And I'm so glad that you said it, and not just said it, but you live it, which is the most important thing. Because if we don't model it, it's not worth anything.
Tom, I don't know. It's also selfishly that I do that, because I'm way happier. I'm more content. Like, that is my happy spot. When we're all close and we're together. It's the same with my relationship with God. Like, when I'm distracted with work, if I'm making that a priority, I am a ball of stress. I am. We just finished a record. We just started this new agency, and we've got a lot of marketing and a lot of promo stuff that we're doing, plus putting this record together and design and getting this tour organized. I'm a ball of stress as a release.
Yeah.
I keep that. I shut that window whenever they come home, or whenever we're all together. I shut it and I lock it, and I'm so much more refreshed and ready to go the next day. I'm better at my career because of that, and I'm a better father and husband, and also a child of the Father. Whenever I'm focused, whenever I set that aside and I focus on them. And I'm happier for it.
Yeah,
I am. Because I am a stressor.
Yeah. Well, it's like I talked about at the. What you're saying is it just resonates with me so much, because my message at the Men's Summit this year was all about slowing our lives down, and having unhurried, undistracted time with the Lord, that then leads to us to be able to have better margin in our life, have more peace, more contentment. That then that doesn't just impact us; it impacts everybody around us, because they can feel the stress, they can feel that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I always talk about, that my wife shared with me several years ago, was that, Tom, you're the thermostat. You're the thermostat of our home. Which, when she told me that at the first part of our conversation, I immediately, to be honest with you, I kind of got emotional and felt guilty, because I thought about how many times have I set my temperature of my house to cold, or unapproachable, or stressed, or whatever, right? And John Ortberg, in his book, talks about how, in his book, hold on, I'd Like You More If You Were More Like Me, which is a great title of a book. But he talks about how when his dad was in a good mood in the morning, like when they were getting ready for school or whatever, there was just something inside that said, today's going to be a good day. And the power that I can emotionally even just think about it right now, because like, we can set the tone, and we can set the temperature of the room that we're in. And
100%.
that's exactly what you're talking about. So I love that.
And you're not always 100%.
Yes.
And you have moments, because like I said, we're
So
human. That just reminded me of a moment during this record. We had this, we got a budget from the record label, and I always want to come in under budget. I want want to be a good partner. And so you've got schedules from the band. We all have different schedules. The studio, the engineer, and the record label, and the budget, and all this stuff. And I had this one track that was really bugging me, and I knew I had to go back in and recut it. And I was going to have to go to the label, to the studio, to the band, reorganize this whole thing for one track. But I had to do it. And it was one of those days where I just had to get this done. And so my daughter was in the house. It was just her and I. My wife was at work, and my daughter was playing her piano. And she walked in and had this kind of concerned look on her face. And I didn't even know I was doing this. But as I'm focusing on all this and listening to this track, I'm making out loud, I'm going, and she could just see me slumped over, and I'm just breathing heavy, and the stress is just kind of boiling. And she walked over to me. She's 7, and she walked over to me and she said, "Dad, would you like to share your feelings with me right now?" And I looked at her in amazement, and I just grabbed her and I hugged her, and I started crying. And she said, "Did I make you sad?" I said, "No, you just made me the happiest dad ever."
Oh my gosh.
I said, "Because what you did is you just kicked a field goal. You just hit a home run, a grand slam.
Yes.
I'm a proud dad right now." And that immediately snapped me out of that moment. But for her to be 7 and to recognize that, and to come over and ask me if I would share my feelings with her, because she could tell I was a little stressed. I was a proud dad. That means that we're doing something right.
Yeah, yes.
Something's right in her life, to where she has that kind of empathy, to where she comes in and wants to, her dad's 52-year-old head to lay down on her shoulders, little 7-year-old shoulders, and share my feelings with her. That was a good moment.
Oh my gosh. And that's a moment. So I just talked about how, you picking up your daughter are moments that she'll never forget. That's a moment that you'll never forget.
Never forget
right?
that.
I mean, when we have those, and so some of those are the best lessons we can learn, where we're like, yeah, what am I so worried about? Like, I mean, this is, and I think that's that faith of the child type vibe, right? I mean, we're told to have faith like a child, and sometimes, well, not sometimes, let's say 99% of the time, we don't have a childlike faith. We just carry so much, and that's, I think, what humor does is we just take life so seriously. We just put so much pressure on and all that. But okay, I'm so glad you shared that. One more thing that I want to touch on before we wrap up our time here together. This has been so good, Paul. Thank you so much for being willing to do this on such short notice. I really, it's been awesome. But the journey of having Hanley was one that was not an easy one. It was one that was a challenge, and I think that it's not a challenge that's uncommon. There's a lot of people that struggle in getting pregnant, and they have this deep desire to grow a family, right? But yet it's just not working. Frustration can set in. In many cases, a lot of times, husbands and wives can struggle in their marriage because of it, and they can experience like just a real drought together. But it was a lengthy journey, several years of trying to bring your daughter into the world. So just if you could just real quick, just talk about how like that journey in some way that you feel comfortable with, of just how what that was like, how God was faithful to you, not just in eventually allowing you to have her, but even just his faithfulness through that journey of not knowing, is this going to work?
Yeah, well, first of all, my wife's younger than me. She's 12 years younger than me. And when we first got married, like I said, we were really career driven, real supportive of each other in that. We took a lot of risk. We moved to Nashville for her to go to Vanderbilt University and get her master's degree. And at the same time, I had a record deal there, which fell through and set me on another path. We didn't talk about having children all that much, except for we weren't ready, And so when we started really talking about, that we would like to have a family, we immediately got pregnant and I was on the road and she had a miscarriage. And so it was really, really tough. I didn't realize, from an outsider and seeing other people go through that sort of thing, it's not something a lot of people share, first of all.
Especially dudes.
Especially dudes.
Yeah.
And it's swept under the rug like it's not. I didn't really go through it. She's having a hard time. And I didn't understand that, really how emotional and how hard it was until it happened to our family. And we lost a child, We immediately got pregnant again, 6-8 months later. And at this time we're, taking temperature, we're calculating the
doing all the
day,
things. Yeah.
all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And she had another miscarriage. And man, at that point, we were just ready to give up. I didn't want to see her go through it. She thought she was broken. Like that was actually her words. I feel like I'm broken. There's something in me that's broke. Like God doesn't want me to have a child. And I'm not supposed to have a child. And so we took a break for a little while and just kind of healed from that whole process. Her emotionally, there was a lot of struggles there. And so we actually looked into adoption and we intentionally prayed about the adoption. We went through that whole process, and through that, we set aside prayer time specifically for that, constantly in prayer over that. And one day, she came to me. She said, "I need to talk to you," because I was getting kind of excited about the thought of us adopting a child. We both were, and there was a family member who had a foster daughter who got pregnant, and she was going to give the baby up for adoption. And so we went through that whole process and we knew this young lady. And so we were praying with her. As a family, we were all in prayer. And I was praying more, it was a selfish prayer, almost like, God, please let this be the baby.
Yeah.
Please let this happen. For Chelsea, I know she needs this. Our family needs this. We were, and at the same time, I was getting a deep feeling like this wasn't meant to happen. Like I'm not getting a peace here about this. She sits me down one day, and I'm actually almost grieving that process, because I knew internally I knew that wasn't going to happen. And she come to me and she said, I'm just not getting a peace about this. I don't think that this is what God wants us to do. And I said, I've had the same feeling. I get this same feeling that this wasn't meant for us. And a week and a half later, she was pregnant. And through that, and that brought up a whole bunch of more fear and uncertainty, because, if she stepped off a step wrong, buddy, I was there with a pillow. I was the helicopter dad.
Yeah.
And real protective of her. And, it was an emotional time.
Mm-hmm.
She lost her dad during that process. Plus, she was getting her doctorate and writing a book all at the same time. Mm-hmm. The timing for us, and this was the first, in all the pregnancies, we were trying really hard on those other pregnancies, and this just happened. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll back up. We did find out that she had a thyroid disease, and through medication and diet and things that were able to get her her levels at a healthy level, and she immediately got pregnant. Mm-hmm. Although we weren't trying for that, but that was a struggle for us the whole pregnancy, because we were scared to death that this would be another statistic,
Mm-hmm.
And but anyway, she was born healthy and happy, and it all worked out.
Because I see some of your posts about her. She's hilarious.
Dude, she's so funny. She had her joke she writes a joke a day for me.
Oh man, you are her dad.
She the other day she wrote one. She said, what do you call a chef that's in line to go to the bathroom? I said, I don't know. A waiter. That's a good joke.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's so. Thank you for being willing to share that story.
Yeah, I don't know how to. Honestly, it's not easy to talk about.
Yeah.
About that, because I don't want to be a sobbing mess on your podcast here, but
it's our podcast, brother. It's our podcast.
Yeah, that was a struggle, but it proves to me that we talk as Christians all the time about God's timing is perfect, and if we just let Him steer the ship, and that's just a perfect example for us. And going back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast, that I'm a much better father now than I would have been at a younger age, and that comes with maturity. But it's just that I'm just so much more present than I would have been at a younger age.
Sure.
And so I'm thankful that God's timing worked out the way it did. It all worked out the way it did, and I wouldn't change any of that. And
again, that's perspective when you're in it, and I think when we're in those challenging moments, I like to say that it sometimes doesn't feel like resting in the Lord. It feels like wrestling with the Lord in that process.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
But when we look back, hindsight's always 20/20 for the most part, right? And you look back and you say, I see God's faithfulness through that. I see how this has led me to be ready for parenting, maybe in a way now than I wouldn't have been back then or whatever. And there's grace in those. I mean, there's grace along the way. And there's grace. And if you would have become a father earlier in life, there would have been grace along that way, right? I mean, there's those types of things. But for you to look back and just say, man, you know what? I get it. I didn't like it. I did not like it when I was going through it. But I get it. And I celebrate, like getting it now and looking ahead and celebrating each of those moments as we look ahead. So, brother, this has been so fun. I mean, this has been it's been such an enjoyable time, but it's also been just real encouraging and fruitful time for me just to hear just some of this content and great stuff that you shared. It ministered to my soul today. And so I thank you so much for being willing to do this. You put a lot of trust in me and saying yes to this because you didn't know who I am, except for what Ted's told you, and pretty much most of it
hasn't been good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would expect that, but I can't thank you enough for joining us. We do something here, and I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, so I hope you don't get mad at me. But we do something on the podcast each time. We just call it the final word.
Yep.
It's the final word that we just want to send listeners and viewers off with. And, I get it from, I remember the final words that my grandfather shared with me when he tells me, like, hey, you're the man of the house. You got to take care of your mom. You got to take care of your sisters, that kind of thing. That's one of the last things he said to me before, he had a heart attack and passed away. And, it's sometimes the final words of people that we remember, and good or bad, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just wondered, whatever the Lord downloads into your brain right now of, 30 to 60, 90 seconds of a final word for listeners today.
I'll just reiterate what we've said throughout this podcast is the thing that's coming to me is just be present and in your relationship with God. And because a lot of times as Christians, we feel safe because we know that we know that we have an eternal place, and sometimes we get too safe. Sometimes we get distracted. And in this day and age, we have a lot of things. We have a lot of distractions. Mm-hmm. So in time of prayer and when you're reading scripture, just be present. Don't do it just to do it, just because, well, that's what they say we have to do. Mm. Be present in that. And with your family, like that to me is my refueling comes when I'm most present with God and when I'm most present with my family, with my wife. I'm intentional about the time that I spend with them, mm-hmm. and I'm intentionally present with them in those moments, because I don't get those moments often. I can't spend 24 hours a day with them. Mm. That's it's just not going to happen. It's reality. But in those moments that you're there and that you do get to spend that time, just be present. Yeah. And that's probably my word. Be there. That's so good. I can't think of a better final word. So Thank you, Paul. Thank you. So again, thank you for being a guest here. Thanks for being a friend now. I just love this. And I know that listeners have gotten a lot out of this. So thanks for being here. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, brother. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Paul Harris today. If you did, like always, I hope you share this episode with other people that are in your relational world. If you want to know more about Paul or his band, the Cleverlys, you can look them up online or find them as well on all the normal social media outlets. That's it for today, everybody. Thanks for joining me again for this edition of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until next time, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others. We'll see you soon.